Any other questions? Anything? Yes, sir.
Okay, when the world stops,
Right.
are we all gonna float off of it?
No. Okay. Interestingly enough, every religion, culture, society that existed 3,500 years ago all say the same thing. Well, they say one of two things, depending on where they're at on the world. Either the sun will not rise for 3 days, or the sun will not set for 3 days. They all say the same thing. So depending on where they were on the globe will determine whether they were right or not, right? Okay. If you take a glass and you fill it half full with water and you hold it in your hand, you're okay. It's nice and still and calm, right? But when you start swirling it, when you first start, water's going to splash up over the side. And then it'll finally fall into a routine, right? And then everything's good. And then when you stop, it splashes up over the side until it settles down and becomes calm again, right? That's the basic of what's going to happen, the basis of what's going to happen. We will see once every 3,600, let me step way back. Once every 6 years, the sun's east and west poles swap. Once every 11 years, the sun's north and south poles swap. And I could have that backward. It might be east and west every 11 years. Once every 66 years, they both flop at some point in time during an Earth year, okay? Once every 3,647 years, which before anybody says anything, I know that 6 and 11 do not go into 3,646 equally. I got it, and I don't understand why the math doesn't make sense either. But once every 3,647 years, the north, south, and east, west poles of the sun flop at the exact same moment. In order for that to happen, the sun has to stop, okay? That's why right now, in the midst of what was supposed to be one of the most powerful solar maximums that we've seen in decades, we're actually going through the lowest solar maximum that we've ever seen in decades. That's why a lot of scientists right now are prophesying that sometime in the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see another mini ice age like what we saw in Europe from 1360 to 1480 something. That's why in the northern hemisphere we're dealing with global warming. In the southern hemisphere we're dealing with global cooling. We're dealing with these two things because we're truly going through what's actually called global dimming, and we're going through global dimming because the sun is slowing down. For the sun to slow down and stop with the way the magnetics work, we will actually stop before that, and then after they start back up, we'll start back up again. So, no, we're not going to drift off into space, but we're going to have a lot of flooding. We're going to have a lot of high tides. We're going to have a lot of earthquakes and volcanoes. And there's no way to avoid it. It's going to happen. So, does that answer your question?
Well, my question was basically, does gravity cease, or we're still gonna have gravity?
Oh yeah, we'll still have gravity. It's just we'll still have gravity. We're good there. So, any other questions?
What happens to the parts of the earth that are exposed to the sun for 3 days straight?
Question is, what happens to the parts of the earth where they're exposed to the sun for 3 straight days? Quite a bit, actually. You're going to have a lot of radiation, mainly because you have to kind of picture let me step way back to answer that question. Sun rotates. You got coronal holes. The coronal holes, the amount of radiation being released from a coronal hole determines the polarity of what's going on around it. So if you kind of picture 3 different figure 8s spinning around the sun at all times. And those figure 8s are large fans, right, that just kind of move around the sun, where when you get to the center of the 8 and you got this huge cone-shaped fan coming out, it's getting wider as it goes, and there's a coronal hole in the center of that, and that's Earth facing, we got some problems, right? Okay. As the sun moves in its rotation, not its movement through the solar system, but its rotation, what you deal with is you have all kinds of pockets that are coronal holes that are moving around, and within these coronal holes you have both positive and negative neutrons, electricity basically, okay? And when the polar opposites of the electricity kind of meet with each other, the sun kind of does this little cough or burp, right? And that's a coronal mass ejection, CME, okay? When the positive and negative go, the sun goes, and the earth gets hit with a wave of radiation, right? Okay. The problem is that our magnetosphere, right, and we're spinning, keeps this magnetosphere moving around us, okay? When we stop, the atmosphere and the stratosphere will continue to go. The core of the Earth will continue to move. The planet will stop, okay? Which is why we're able to still have gravity. However, when we stop, the planet stops, the core continues to move, and the atmosphere and the stratosphere continue to move. But because the planet stops, the magnetosphere stops. So for that 74 hours, a little bit more than 3 days, everything coming off the sun, which will be massively increased because it's changing, right? It's coughing and all of that, right? We're going to be being bombarded, right? I mean, just left and right with CMEs and solar flares and solar radiation and coronal hole radiation, which, guys, all four things are completely different. You know, when you hear of a solar flare, CMEs are good, solar flares are bad, but solar radiation is worse and coronal radiation is horrendous for us, okay? But picture we're standing there and this shield that's normally spinning, which the spin is what gives it its strength, right? Is just getting bombarded and bombarded and bombarded. Eventually it's going to start to weaken. So the part of the Earth that is sun facing at the point where we slow down is going to be in for a very bad time, okay? I probably would not go outdoors. As a matter of fact, we'd probably, if we're Earth facing at that time, which we won't be, we'll be, our side of the Earth will be non-sun facing. We'll have 3 days of darkness.
Do you know that? Have they scientifically calculated that?
No, but the Mayans all said that sun wouldn't rise for 3 days. So that's what I base it on.
Satellites that are going around now, the Earth stops, and we're all tied into these satellites with our computers, with our cell phones, and everything. Is this somewhat?
Yeah.
Is it going to delay all that?
Well, it's worse than just delay all of that. You've got the question is how is that going to affect our satellites, guys? Make a long story short. I'll try to keep it very short. Every nation's satellites in the world rotate with the Earth, and a little bit of information I just found out today, thanks to my wife who does a lot of research and finds some really cool things. Israel's satellites actually rotate the opposite direction. They're the only country whose satellites rotate opposite to the Earth's spin, which I thought was pretty cool. But the atmosphere, the stratosphere will continue to move. Okay? See how those satellites are going to continue to move. So they're going to be out of sync with us. But more importantly, what are they going to look like when they come back around? Day one, maybe. Day two, possibly. Day three, But you want to know why I'm not concerned with day three? Hurricane Sandy, 3 days, no food. They were beating each other with shovels and dumpsters. What is man's reaction going to be globally? When in one spot that's already a hotbed for violence and distrust, the sun doesn't set for 3 days. And in another spot where there's a lot of crime and a lot of spoiled people that don't believe they need more than a day or two's worth of stuff because they can just stop at the grocery store on the way home from work tomorrow. How are all these people going to react? By the time day three gets around and our cell phones don't work anymore, that's the least of our worries. Because on day four, we're going to move again. So the floodwaters will just start to be receding from the coastlines. People will be starving. People will be going crazy because why hasn't the sun rose for 3 days? It's the end of the world. A lot of groups that claim to be Christians that have no understanding of the Bible, which is much different from the Christians that actually do have an understanding, right? We'll all be gathering, oh, it's the end of the world. God is coming, we're going home now, sell everything, it's all over. And they're all going to be sorely disappointed. And on day four, when the cell phones don't work and there's violence in the streets of every city in the world, and we start back up again, we're going to have the flooding again, and the tornadoes again, and the earthquakes again, and the tsunamis again, and the hurricanes again, and then certain areas, winter storms, depending on what time of the year it is for everybody. It's going to be devastating across the board. So we're going to be devastated, then we're going to have 3 days of darkness or 3 days of sunlight, and it's going to be devastating again, and people are going to be going crazy. That's what I worry about, because by day 4, I'm not going to care that my cell phone doesn't work. I'm going to be fighting to survive at that point. So, but yeah, it will be a major disruption.